On February 11th, 2000, Goliath Open is the world's tallest full-circuit coaster, a 235-foot lift hill and a 255-foot drop. On May 13th, 2000, Millennium Force stole that title, 310 feet with a 300-foot drop, the first coaster in human history to hit that 300-foot mark. However, it didn't take long for it to have company and for that record to fall. Across the Pacific Ocean in Japan, Nagashima Spaland was ready to debut Steel Dragon 2000, 318 feet tall, 307-foot drop, and a staggering 8,133 feet of track. The coaster wars were on, from Giovanola in California, to Intamin in Ohio, to D.H. Morgan in Japan. All these coasters became instant icons in the coaster world, but only one held all the records, and it was Steel Dragon 2000. 25 years after it opened to the public, I made a trip out to Japan, and this was near the top of my most anticipated coasters list. I got 2 rides, and I'm going to share my experience with you today. These are my pros and cons of Steel Dragon 2000, the longest coaster in the world. First, I want to thank my Patreons and my new member, Thomas Buck. If you want bonus access, bonus content, behind the scenes videos, a shout out when you join, and your name on this fancy Patreon screen, follow the link below and join. First off, this is 318 feet tall, so as you're driving to the park, you just see this massive gray structure with red track on top, those supports fanning out extra wide to guard against earthquakes. Being in Japan, they have to be prepared, and when you stand under this thing, you can really see how wide those supports go. Steel Dragon runs right across the front of the park, going all the way out past the parking lot for its twister section. The coaster really has that wow factor when you look at it. Not only having a lift hill at 318 feet, but 2 other hypercoaster hills, one at 252 feet, that's taller than Goliath, and the other at 210 feet. Even that third hill is taller than the next tallest coaster in the park, Hikuge at 180 feet. You enter the park and go left, all the way to the far end of the park, and that's where you see the big sign, Steel Dragon 2000. The line was not very long when I went, and they had 2 trains going even despite slow operations, but the crowds on that Sunday were light, so that helped also. If you want to buy a priority pass, I believe they run 1,000 yen, or $6 to $7, and just know they only accept cash. Of all the parks in America going cashless, there's still a lot of places in Japan where you must pay in cash, and this is one of them. They have a test seat out front to see if you can ride, and just to let you know, this is not very accommodating to larger riders. This is definitely the most restrictive coaster in the park, so if you think you may be borderline, I would try that test seat. You walk into the queue, and they give you a basket for all your stuff in your pockets. Nothing is allowed to ride, and that basket will have to go into a locker. I don't love having to put everything in a locker, but I would consider that the first pro. You can hang onto your stuff all the way until you get on the train. The lockers are on the other side of the platform, so it's basically a loose article bin, and you can lock up all your stuff and wrap the key around your wrist. Everything feels secure, and you don't get nervous about leaving your stuff out in the open. The first con is seat assignment. Like all rides in Japan, there is assigned seating and it's not negotiable. You are assigned a row as you enter the station, and it loads front to back. So you could play the game where you try to hold back and let people pass you, or you can take what you get. That's what I did, and I was lucky enough to get a back row ride the first time, and row 3 the second time. So I got a pretty good idea about this ride in the front and the back. This has 7 cars per train, 2 rows per train, so a total of 14 rows and 28 riders. Once you sit down, you get to experience pro number 2. These are B&M Hyper trains. We're talking about the big recliner and the clamshell lap bar. These are peak comfort, and it's weird to see these trains with just standard 2 across seating, not the 4 across of their Gigas or older Hypers, or that staggered seating like on the Cedar Fair Hypers. For the first 13 years of the ride's life, it used Morgan trains that you'll find on Mamba or Wild Thing or Steel Force. But they got much more comfortable trains, and they've been using them for 12 years now, as coaster enthusiasts marvel at the weirdness of having a B&M train on a Morgan coaster. However, with these trains comes con number 2. There is now a 6'1" max height limit. That is as short as I've ever seen for a non-kids coaster. Usually it's 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", but 6'1" isn't all that tall. Personally, I'm right up against that limit. Based on what I saw, its enforcement is hit or miss at best, but just be aware this could be a problem if you're even slightly above average when it comes to American height. I'm not sure why this changed when the trains were replaced. Maybe because the riders are sitting up higher than before, and since this wasn't designed for these trains, they may be playing it safe with all those clearances. If you pass the height test, you sit down and buckle your seatbelt, pull down your lap bar, and the ops will check you. Here's pro number 3. These ops don't staple. They don't have those dreadful heavy hands. You can leave yourself with some room, just in case you're in a seat that has good airtime, it won't be ruined by the ops. You pull out of the station, hang a right-hand U-turn, and up you go. This lift is not fast and it's not steep. It's everything Millennium Force is not. Since 2000, B&M has made coasters this size with a chain lift, but when Intamin did it, they chose to use a cable lift, and Morgan opted for 2 chains. You can see where one stops and the other begins, but you can't feel it. Morgan did a good job of hiding that transition, and it's seamless. There is one advantage of a long, slow lift. You can look around and soak in that view. Nagashima Spaland has a beautiful setting right on a peninsula, just like Cedar Point. It's easy to forget that if you ride the rides near the ground level, but rides like Steel Dragon remind you where you are, and it's awesome. Next, you plunge down that 307-foot drop, 95 miles an hour, and there's con number 3. That's a 68-degree drop, and you barely get mild airtime even in the back row. In the front, you get absolutely nothing. This isn't a big shock. You don't fly out of your seat on the first drop of the Morgan Hypers either, so I didn't expect this to be any different. This has a 68-degree angle. That's 7 degrees better than Goliath for reference, so you do get something on that drop in the back, unlike Goliath. And I know some of you claim you get airtime on Goliath's drop, but I keep riding it and I just can't find out how that's possible. That being said, when it comes to Steel Dragon 2000, you would hope this would be better. Also, this has the same problem Pantherian has, where you're only at that max angle for a short time, and you start leveling out pretty early. You still pick up all the speed after leveling out, but you lose that stomach dropping feeling you get on the max angle. So this drop does feel super long, but it doesn't really pack a real punch. That's a problem for a Giga, where the drop is the main reason it exists. You fly up and over the next 2 hills standing over 200 feet. You feel a little bit of airtime as you crest each one in the front, and going over that first big camelback in the back gives you some decent floater, but you don't get anything on the next one. That doesn't dive straight back down. That goes into a twister section, and this is where it really racks up the track length. 2 small helices and 1 giant one. And on the American Morgan Hypers, this is actually a really fun part of the ride. You feel all that speed at the bottom. It even has an out of control feeling, but here's con number 4. I didn't get that feeling on Steel Dragon 2000. This whole section was so drawn out, it didn't have that same chaotic feeling, and even though it had all the speed, it wasn't tight enough to really pull any force. It kind of felt like a mine train. This is also where you really start to notice con number 5. This is by far the roughest Morgan I've ever seen. Morgan is known for being glossy smooth, from their mine trains or their hypers. It's actually remarkable that these 20 to 30-year-old coasters are still so smooth after all these years. I've never once had a complaint about a rattle on any of these, even despite their size and speed. But Steel Dragon 2000 did not run great, and some people seem to think it's because of the trains. I don't know how it ran with the Morgan trains, but with the new B&M trains, maybe there's a bit of a mismatch and that causes some roughness. At 95 miles an hour, you don't have much room for error, so that makes it worse. After the twister section, you wind into the mid-course brake run, line back up with the lift hill, and that's where you find the 4th and biggest pro, the finale. It's so infuriating when you ride a coaster like Wild Thing at Valley Fair. See all those awesome airtime hills to end, but the mid-course brake run slows you down to a crawl. Steel Force has the same problem, and Mamba for a short time didn't have their mid-course hitting as hard, but it still was never that good in my opinion. The first time we rode through the mid-course and I didn't feel us slow down, I knew we were in for a party, and that's exactly what happened. The airtime on the return trip was great. It wasn't mad ejector like Magnum, but it gave strong floater on every hill, and there was a ton of them, having to make it all the way back to the station. So this finale left me with a very positive impression of the ride, even despite the disappointment of the first half. This was good in the front and the back. The front may have been a bit stronger, and the back a bit more sustained. Though, on my front ride, the seatbelt was especially tight, which was my own fault, but that hurt the airtime a little bit. So, how do you rank a ride like this? So tall, so fast, so long, but leaves a lot of potential on the table, but also doesn't totally blow it. This ride was a lot of fun. I always love a long ride, and until Falcon's Flight opens, this is the longest in the world. I also love a good airtime pack finale, and this has a really good one. So, in the end, I found a spot for this, not in my top 50, but in my top 100. This is my number 87 coaster. I heard a lot of not so great things about Steel Dragon 2000, so I didn't go in with high expectations. Having ridden the other Morgan Hypers, I wasn't surprised by these bad reviews. I figured it may be a supersized Steel Force, but in the end, I was pleasantly surprised. Yes, the ride has its flaws. Yes, it rides a lot like a big Morgan, which isn't really a good thing, but the airtime at the end really stunned me, and as a whole giant package, Steel Dragon 2000 does deserve to be in my top 100. Let me know what you think about this ride, if you've ridden it, or if it's something that's been on your radar for a long time. If anything about this review surprised you or confirmed something you already knew, sound off in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, and if you're new here and love coasters, please give me a sub. Also, check out my second channel, where I post copyright-free off-ride footage. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.